150 firemen have fought the blaze for 9 hours. It is burning still. EC and US negotiators do a deal to avert a world trade war. America drops the threat of sanctions. Good evening. Part of the centuries-old Windsor Castle, one of the Queen's residences, has been consumed by fire for much of the day. 150 firemen have been battling the blaze, which has caused millions of pounds worth of damage. The Duke of York joined scores of people who formed a human chain to save one of the greatest collections of art treasures in the world. He said the Queen, who went to the castle soon after hearing about the fire, was absolutely devastated. 3 people were hurt in the blaze, which police say is not the work of terrorists. Windsor Castle stands on a hill overlooking the town. The fire began in the private chapel in the Chester Tower and rapidly spread west, badly damaging St George's Hall, where state banquets are held, before moving on into some of the state apartments and north into the Brunswick Tower, which was completely gutted. The private apartments appear to have been successfully sealed off from the blaze, but the Queen helped staff to remove many of the contents as a precaution.
The smoke billowing from Windsor Castle shortly after 11:30 this morning could be seen from more than a mile away, and the acrid smell hung heavy on the air. The largest inhabited castle in the world, with some 1,000 rooms, was in the grip of a major blaze. Within minutes, the fire engines began arriving, and before long, more than 200 firemen were trying to control the flames. Their task was made all the more urgent by the need to protect as best they could the priceless works of art, furnishings and armour. The fire apparently started in the private chapel on the first floor of the northeast wing of the castle. It spread along St George's Hall, used for state banquets for many visiting world leaders, and then on through the white, green and crimson state drawing rooms, as well as the state dining room. None of the royal family was in residence at the time, but the Duke of York had called at the castle to do some research work. He was in a room on the other side of the building when he was informed of the fire. Later, with the flames still raging behind, he spoke of how he'd helped carry out some of the artworks. He spoke too of his feelings.
Well, actually, shock, horror, and shock and horror in the fact that it took hold so quickly. I mean, I happened to be around the castle when it started, and I heard the fire alarm, and some 2 or 3 minutes later, when I came out of the room that I was actually in, you could see the smoke, not as extensive as it is now, but you could definitely see it.
He said everyone's immediate concern had been to move the works of art out, and he had joined in the effort.
I mean, I've been in, and I've looked in St George's Hall under supervision of the chief fire officer, and seen firsthand what it looks like, and it's a pretty nasty mess.
Throughout the afternoon, human chains, including not only the Duke but the Dean of Windsor, worked to pass out books and any other valuables that could be moved. The fire brigade said the fire was contained, but it was clearly not yet under full control. Local people, for whom the castle is a symbol of the historic significance of their town, were devastated.
It's heartbreaking. It really is the most awful thing that you can imagine happening. It really is an absolute tragedy. There are tables that they've been pulling out where you can see the veneer and the leatherwork lifting off and all the smoke damage and the staining, antique, some beautiful things. It's an absolute tragedy.
The Queen, who had driven down from Buckingham Palace in the early afternoon, was among those surveying the damage from the courtyard. She then helped move some of the paintings and artworks out of her private apartments. As night fell, the Duke of York explained that she would not be able to stay at the castle overnight.
They are evacuating the works of art and furniture from all the rooms that could possibly be at risk, and that is purely a precaution. Therefore, the Queen's apartments are being taken out and secured elsewhere, which means that there is nowhere for the Queen to stay tonight except Buckingham Palace, so she will be returning there.
And he gave this assessment of the fire.
It's certainly as bad as it was first feared. I think that everybody thought when we first responded to this that it was a small fire that possibly could be put out quite quickly. It became evident very soon after that it was not a small fire, and this is a great deal bigger than anybody expected.
A short time ago, the fire brigade spoke about the problems in controlling the fire.
There are many hidden avenues or hidden paths for a fire to travel. And if you take St George's Hall itself, it has a 6-foot false ceiling. And if you can imagine, there's a void, therefore, that runs the whole length of the hall, 6 feet deep, through which the fire could travel. Now, there is no way that the fire brigade can actually get to that area to inject water in.
For a time tonight, it looked as if the blaze could spread further, but the brigade say it is contained. The cause hasn't been established yet, but the castle has been undergoing extensive renovation, mostly electrical rewiring, for the past 3 years. The work was due to be completed in the next few months. Royal residences such as Windsor cannot be insured, and so the cost of this national tragedy, which will run into millions, will be met by the government.
The Royal Art Collection at Windsor Castle is regarded as one of the finest in the world. It contains hundreds of priceless works, some of which may have been damaged beyond repair. Experts say it's likely to be many days before the full extent of the damage is known.
Windsor Castle is much more than a royal home. It's also home to as great a collection of works of art as any single site in the world. It belongs not to the Queen but to the nation and is visited by some 4 million members of the public every year. Among the treasures hopefully saved today, paintings by Holbein, Canaletto, Rembrandt, Rubens, Van Dyck, plus priceless furniture, armour, porcelain. The castle has also been the setting for innumerable state occasions, set within irreplaceable architecture commissioned by monarchs from Norman through Georgian times.
We've come close to a major national disaster because Windsor Castle, with the exception of the cathedrals and Westminster Abbey, is the greatest building in the country. It's identified so closely with our history since the time of William the Conqueror and Henry II.
We may have lost one of the greatest ensemble of rooms, of state rooms, for George IV. They could be reconstructed, but a reconstruction can't replace an original.
The largest room in the castle was St George's Hall, built for the Knights of the Garter in the 14th century, where the Queen has entertained leaders like Mikhail Gorbachev. It was near the epicentre of the fire, has been badly damaged, its wooden roof has collapsed. It can never be quite the same again. Some of the masonry and fabric affected by this fire at Windsor Castle can no doubt be restored or repaired, but it seems likely that priceless national treasures will have been irreparably damaged or destroyed. The fire at Hampton Court Palace in 1986 showed just how vulnerable ancient buildings are. Unlike modern structures, they often lack precautions like sprinklers and fire doors. Much of the damage there has been rectified by 5 years of painstaking work from craftsmen. But today's fire at Windsor is much more calamitous.
St George's Hall, one gathers, sounds almost as though it's gutted. But it's the rooms in proximity to that. We don't know what state they're in, because you have to sort of think of the heat of the flames, the smoke, and what they used to put the fire out.
The castle, which gives the royal house its name, has survived 9 centuries as fortress, palace, museum and national symbol. But today's fire has damaged it more than any other single event.
Well, our court correspondent Jenny Bond is at Windsor Castle now. Jenny, what's the latest?
Well, as you may be able to see behind me, the flames do seem to have died down for the time being anyway. There's still about 200 firemen in there fighting to contain it, and they're confident they will be able to do so. I understand that the Queen has now left the castle. She, as we've heard, is quite devastated by what has happened. She's seen some of the damage for herself. She's taken part in the rescue work. And she's concerned not only about the castle, but particularly about those who've been fighting so hard to contain the fire. And she's expressed particular concern about those who were injured. It's come at the end of a year for her that has been extraordinarily difficult, with many personal problems. A year that should have been one of great celebration for her, being the 40th anniversary of her accession to the throne.
Jenny, it's 10 hours since the fire started, almost 10 hours. Any sign at all about when it's going to be put out?
Well, the fire brigade are certainly talking about the early hours of the morning before it's put out. They are insisting that it is contained, that their strategy has worked, which was to contain it between 2 strong structural points of the castle. But they're talking about working to the early hours of the morning and indeed being on this site for several days to come.
Jenny, thanks very much indeed.